So what I think I'll do now, having gone over all that agenda with you guys and giving you guys a chance to ask questions, which you didn't have, I'm now going to, in a second, switch over to the 40S and record the class for finishing the advanced classes example. But so that you 30S students don't have to reconnect later, it's time, since it's Friday, for the bad joke of the week. Bad jokes of the week are by definition bad, not good, not funny. They're neither repeated nor explained. So if you don't like it, you don't get it, you don't hear it, it's not my fault. Now, normally you have the right to accept or reject the bad joke. But since you guys aren't talking, the way you can reject this joke if you're in 30S is to log off right now. The way to reject this joke if you're in 40S is to mute your speakers right now. As I'm going to say, did you guys hear about this amazing love story? One car antenna fell in love with another car antenna. And they fell in love and they got married. The ceremony was beautiful, but the reception was amazing. All right, that's the bad joke of the week. So I know I normally end with that, but now what I want to do is share my screen and finish the advanced classes example with you 40S students. All right, so last week, yesterday, I went through all these slides showing you kind of how we progressed up to this spot right here, where this is now where our example is. That we yesterday made this class called a box, and today we're going to make this class called a house to finish up this example. So that's the last two things we'll be doing. I'm not going to go back through all those slides I did yesterday, showing how we progressed from one spot to here, okay? I also showed you guys real briefly some information about this concept called generics. Oops. Hang on one sec, my computer's a little bit frozen. Okay, let's try that again. So how we yesterday looked at this little concept called generics. So just to show you again in the notes that you can find on my website or in various other places, that this concept of generics is so that we don't have to work with a specific data type, but we can work with what's called a generic data type. So we don't have to define it in either what's called a generic method or within a class that uses the generic, called a generic class. And the syntax in code is to write these angle brackets with a single letter in between, okay? Now what you're gonna see today is you can actually have multiple generics within one class, and you'll see how you can achieve that in today's example, okay? So there is the example in the notes about the concept of generics, okay? But we will see that in the example today as well. All right, so turning to the example. We started yesterday by building up some primitive data types, some primitive variables. The kinds of variables you start learning if you took the grade 10 course, or if you took the grade 11 course. In the first unit, you learn about these very basic data types. In reality, everything is built up from these basic data types. But then we use the primitive data types to build what are called more class level data types, or more advanced data types. This is also a preview of the stuff you're going to see in the tutorial for the next unit you guys are going to do. These are called wrapper classes, where instead of just a primitive type called Boolean, we have this class Boolean with a capital B. So we built class objects from the primitive objects. This also included string, which has always been a class object. Then we used a generic method called output, which used, if I go down and look at it, this method output used that angle bracket notation to indicate that the data type it would be using is generic. It's not going to be defined in the parameter of this method. Where it's going to be defined is when the method is called. Then we moved on to making a generic class called the box class, okay? And in the box class, it also used that notation to say somewhere in a variety of places in this class, I'll be using a generic data type that I'll define later. And I use the letter T as a placeholder. When I later turn the box class into a box object, that's when I define the different data types that the boxes hold. And then we had methods to peek in the boxes and even open the boxes. So that's where we're at. So for the final time in this unit, we are now going to make a class for this package. We started this class or this unit with one class, and now we're up to, I believe, about 20 some classes. So new Java class, and we're going to call it house. H-O-U-S-E. We're going to make a house class. This is not going to have much code in it. So this is why today's lesson is not going to take that long. You can go ahead and delete all the methods. We don't need the ones that came in from the template. We're just going to start with a basic version of this house class. Okay. Now, let me put in a comment for it. It's going to represent a house, obviously, that has a homeowner. So the house will have a homeowner. So that'll be one of our properties, a public homeowner. I'm not going to define what type of homeowner that is. So in order to do that, I'm going to incorporate generics. Okay? I'm going to say T. So the homeowner is of type T. I'm not going to define the data type this homeowner is. Okay? It's going to be generic. But now what you're going to see is that generics can be constricted. Okay? Okay, and that's what I have in the comment here. It is a homeowner who is generically restricted to be a person object. So the way to do that is you can say T extends person. And what that means is it's any generic object as long as it's a person or any children of the person class. That's what that means. It can be a person object or any children of the person class. So when I make a house, I couldn't make the homeowner a potato because, or an apple class, because an apple isn't coming from the person class. It's not a child of the person class. But another thing I can do with this is I'm going to make this house also have some contents. Right? There's going to be stuff inside the house. I'm going to just call that contents. What data type is that going to be? Well, it's also going to be generic, but not the same generic. So I'm going to use a different letter for this. Now I can use any letter I want. I'm just going to go alphabetically here to U. To add a second generic, I just put a comma and then I add it like that, just like the way you'd add another parameter to a method. So this adds a second generic, okay? Generically anything, okay? To add, I'm going to just add a little comment to this. To add another generic, use a comma, class signature inside the brackets. Okay, which is what we did. We put a comma and another to act as another placeholder. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We have two generic things here. Okay, T homeowner is the generic owner of this house. Okay, must be a person object or any children of that class. Whereas contents, that's a different generic item. It's not the same. It's not the same as the U. As the T. Since this is a different generic object, a different letter is used. Okay. All right, so I'm going to add that comment in there. so that you guys have that, okay? This will obviously go on GitHub. Just adjusting it so it's nice on GitHub. There we go. Okay, so there's our house class, extends person. So it has two generics, T and U. If I didn't have this in here, then T could be anything, any generic item, just like U can be any generic item. But by having that in there, I've restricted the generic itself of the house class. All right. Now we're only going to make one method for this class, just one. It's a public void method called party. We're going to have a house party. So it's just a regular old method so far. Okay, it's called party. So what's it going to do? Well, I'm going to do an output with this. I'm going to output who the homeowner is. The homeowner, okay, slash new line, okay, plus, well, I'm going to go to the homeowner dot, because the homeowner is restricted to class person, notice that when I type dot, name appears here because it knows name is a property of the person class. It has to be. If I didn't include this, if this wasn't in there, and then I type the dot, notice name doesn't appear anymore because now it can be any object, okay? Which means it can only, the only thing it knows is the stuff that comes from the object class. So by restricting it, it actually adds a little bit of a nicer feature there that now I can pull in the name of that homeowner, okay? That's the name of the homeowner, okay? And I'm going to attach a little bit more to that. I'm going to say with a new line character, and the contents of the house, another new line character. So what would the contents be? Well, I'm going to take my contents dot. Now with contents, I don't have it restricted. So really the only thing I can use with contents is my toString method to turn the contents into a string. But I'm going to do a little more with this. Okay. So this is our party method so far. Homeowner with their name, the contents with their name. You can certainly put these all, you don't have to separate lines if you don't want to. I'm going to maybe space this out. A little different, right? Okay, so I got my homeowner, I got my contents. I'm going to put something else in there too. I'm going to change up this party method a little bit. I'm going to give it a parameter. I'm going to give it a bunch of items. There we go. But items implies that it's multiple things. So it's going to be an array of items. An array of what items? Well, believe it or not, I'm going to make that a generic array. An array of generic items, but not the same as T and not the same as U. So I'm going to add a third generic type up here. I could just put V up here, and then that would have no problem with V down here. But instead, I'm going to go back to something we learned, instead of adding it up there, in our advanced classes test thing. I'm going to make this just a generic method. So I'm going to put V right here. So I've modified this method. V is only within this method itself. Does it understand that V is the generic? And I'm going to restrict it. V extends food. So what that means, what the comment for this method is that this is a generic method that has a homeowner. It's going to consume all the food items that are passed. So really, it's all the generic restricted food items. They are food items that were restricted to food and all food and all food children items that are passed in an array. It's not one food item, it's an array of food items. Okay? And you know what? I think I'm going to change the name of this. No, I'll leave it as items. That's fine. So there we go. Children of the food class. It's an array of generic items that are food objects or children of the food class. That's what I'm passing to this method. Okay? You'll also notice that it will ask you when you use generics to add a little parameter tag for this. Okay? So this is V, which is food objects or children of the food class. So I could put that as my comment, food objects. Okay. So maybe it should have been F, should have been the letter I chose there. But anyways, that's going to be my generic method. And now I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to use my enhanced for loop. Okay. Every item in items, or every item in items, and I can even put that. That's the way you should read the enhanced for loop. I'm going to have my homeowner dot consume that item. So the consume method is built into the person class. And we know homeowner has been restricted to being a person. So we know it has that method built in. Item comes out of this array of items, which comes from food. And since food is what the parameter of the consume method is, this all seems to come together nicely. So this is a pretty complicated method here in terms, not of the amount of lines of code, but in terms of all the concepts that it's incorporating here from this unit. So the final thing we're going to do with this is actually test it. Okay. So the final thing to do is we're going to have a generic class with multiple generic types. Generic method. It's using that. So it has multiple generic types. It has a generic method. It has the enhanced for loop. There's a lot of stuff going on there. It has restricted generics. There's multiple generics. It has restricted generics. It has a generic method. It has the enhanced for loop. It has a lot going on. So let's make a house. House equals new house. In theory, that would be all I need to do other than import it. But we know that's not all you need to do. When you use a class with generics, just like we did back here with the box class, you have to define what the actual data types are. So here, I'm going to use the angle brackets. And inside the angle brackets, I now need to define two objects. I'm going to make it a teacher. A teacher is a person, comma. For my contents, it could be anything. So how about a meeting? Okay. And then on this side, I can put what they call the diamond right there. So this is the proper way to create a house object that uses those data types. So anyways, now that I have it, house dot homeowner equals, it can be any teacher. So how about Mr. Walks? Mr. Walks is a teacher. For my house, the contents can be any meeting. Well, I have a meeting. It's called meeting, right? So my house has a homeowner and it has a contents. This is my house where I hold a meeting. Now let's create an array of food objects. So we know how to make arrays. Food array, we'll call it the fridge. days. Okay, and yes, I have to import that. Okay, now you might be thinking, wait a minute, you said that you couldn't create food objects. Well, you're right. I can't create food objects. It is a food is a abstract class. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an array of food objects. And the objects aren't going to be food objects. They're going to be children of the food objects, the apple and the steak. Those are both food objects, and those I can instantiate because they're not from an abstract class. They're children of an abstract class. And finally, we're going to test our generic method. House.party. And take the fridge with you when you party. And believe it or not, that would be where we have now completed advanced classes. If this all works, we may have to debug this. But that is the final piece of, I'll just sort of pause on here for a second. So the code I've added today to our testing class is this code right here. Also added this house class right here. I'm slowly scrolling through in case you follow the video later. And here, and now it's time to test it. And of course, ooh, look at that. Homeowner, Mr. Walks, and the contents is a meeting. We never did write a two-string method for the meeting class. So it's just outputting what the two-string method of the object class is. Then we wash our hands and we eat an apple, and then we grill it on the barbecue and we eat a steak. It's Mr. Walks at the party eating the food in the fridge. And that's it. That's our look at advanced classes. Here are all the classes we've created. In yellow there, you can see it was 22 classes for this unit that we created. Some of them, like the doctor and the baker, were very simple. They didn't really require much work. Others, like the person class, took a long time to work on, or the athlete class. You'll also notice that there were classes from our previous units. So there's been a total of 26 classes that you have in this Computer Science 40S example. That's a lot of code. And that's also why examples in the 40S course are worth marks, because they take a lot of time to do, and they really, hopefully, will show your learning. That's all I wanted to talk to you guys about. It's 11:30 on the nose, so I think that's really good timing. I'm going to turn off the video now.